I'm excited to talk with you about evaluation. I'm also grateful that we have Steve here. So if we have additional questions, we can just talk through. Just to orient you to what I have planned for today, I have a brief slideshow, not to provide too much information, but just to kind of set the stage about observations. And then I actually have a clip. And my favorite way to teach observations is to observe something and practice what it's like to write down what it is that we see. So that's the plan for today. We'll go over the slides and then we'll probably do maybe 2 rounds of just taking observation notes and talking about what we noticed and what we experienced during that process. Oh, and we are already recording, which is great. I'm going to share my screen and um, please, if you have any questions, just let me know and interrupt me. That's no problem. It's a small group. I'm going to start the slideshow from the beginning. Okay, great. So we're going to talk about observations and do so within the context of really out of school time and outdoor school and youth development. Um, I'm the research coordinator in 4-H. My focus is really on youth programs and what the impact of youth programs are. And I really love that research to practice continuum and just thinking about how to get better with what we're doing from wherever you're at and how to do so in a culturally responsive way. That's my Mastiff Pearl next to me. I wanted to start off by just mentioning a little bit about surveys. I wasn't sure if Deborah was going to, and she did, but just to reiterate, a lot of youth programs jump in to say, let's do a survey as the first way in which they think about quickly and efficiently collecting information from young people about their experience. And I like to always just think, are we getting good data from this survey? And that often, when I pass out that survey to a group of young people, I hear groans coming from them. They might have some competing interests at the table where they're filling out their survey, or if it's before lunch, you name it. There can be questions about whether or not understanding the questions are really a good fit. Um, there might be discomfort on the structure of the survey. This happens to me when I feel like neither of those things are true for me, and I really am uncomfortable with kind of the whole framing or maybe the boxes that I'm being asked to fit into. There's also just a desire to please. I sometimes think about, are they protecting my feelings and answering this in a particular way? Or, is there a different way that maybe if they felt more psychologically safe, they might answer this a little differently? Um, I think about too, sometimes young people, whether or not they even want to provide accurate information. I think sometimes, I see, I got a lot, there's a meme going around right now about gender options, one of them being a Walmart bag. So a lot of surveys I got this last summer said Walmart bag as a part of their gender. So I have to say, I always think about that as well. And I really think about how many people actually answered the survey and what's the perspective of everyone who's there. So I like when we can use observations as a method, not that it's perfect, but it's a different tool in your toolbox, and it can provide, there's some strengths and challenges with every method that you use. So observations, you don't have the survey fatigue. You don't have that straight lining that sometimes you get. You don't have incomplete surveys. I really like observations from an equity standpoint because it focuses on the experience of everyone, not just those who are willing to complete a survey. So you can understand and see things in a different way. I like that you can also get information pretty rapidly. Not always, of course. It just depends on if you're using it for that qualitative or quantitative purposes and what it looks like. But if you're coming in to count the number of open-ended questions that I'm using in this session, you can do so. And within the time the session's over, have very quick and easy to use information. Observations also allow you to witness things that you might not have noticed. If you do an interview or a focus group, or you write a survey question, there are going to be things that you're thinking about, but what you're able to see when you conduct an observation is sometimes incredibly illuminating for helping to think about even future evaluations or program quality. In terms of quality, quality matters on all things in evaluation, but this includes observations. So not every observation is a great observation. And I like to think about this in terms of these types of questions. So first of all, I think the first one I want to start with is number 2. How are your own interpretations getting in the way of what you're thinking about, what you're seeing? And we're going to talk about this a little bit more, but it's really important when you do an observation that you notice what is actually happening versus what is your interpretation of what is happening. It's also really great to take notes. Every time I do an observation, I realize, wow, I have a lot that I can do to improve my note taking. And I try to sometimes think about, is there another method that I can do, like a recording so I can go back? Is there other strategies that I can use to help me improve my note taking capacity? And then, of course, what am I doing with those notes? So many observations, if you don't sit down and, as Steve mentioned, think about what your analysis is going to look like afterwards, then the observations do no good. That first question too about quality, I like where we started on what's our evaluation plan and therefore what's the method that we want to use. So I have used observation to look at educator best practices. And in doing so, that's a really big lens. So what specifically are the educator best practices? You'll notice that the more that you have clarity about exactly what you're looking for, then the better your notes get, because there's a lot that you can capture. So are you looking for evidence of youth engagement? What does that specifically look like? It's helpful just to think through it beforehand to help you understand where to focus when you're conducting an observation. So briefly, some steps to conducting an observation. What are you looking for within that observation? I also like to say who is conducting that observation. It's not possible, in my experience, to run a program and conduct an observation. It's too much to do. So is there a person whose specific role is going to be to conduct an observation? When and where is it going to be happening? That's also helpful. Were the youth just fed? Is it right before something big is going to happen? Is there a guest speaker happening? There could be multiple things that are going on. So when you're conducting that observation, it might be helpful to plan through and maybe even try and test a couple different strategies so that you might understand the impact of different times of day or different times of programming. I like to, in one of the projects I do, we try to find the beginning, the middle, and the end of a program to see how an opening looks, what it looks like when activities are happening, and what closure and reflection looks like. So that's one strategy. And then we also, again, how you synthesize and and how you analyze what you collect is something that is important just to consider. When I work on observations, I just use a blank sheet of paper. And on that blank sheet of paper, I write what it is that I see. I don't try to use a framework where I collect information and plug it in right there. That's too much. When I come as an observer, I look and I scan the room and I just take blank notes. Some folks prefer to type, so it's really about what you can do quickly, efficiently, in a low impact way that might fit the setting. It's different if you're outside or if you're inside. Um, but the tools that you'll need in order to conduct the observation, you'll want to think about what works best for you as well. So, um, does anyone have any questions for what I've covered so far? Nope. Okay. So, I want to talk, I mentioned earlier that when we're thinking about observations, it's really helpful to step back and look at your own biases. And so, some of the things that we regularly say when we talk about a youth program or a school program are things like, well, the educator explained that activity well. I think it's helpful for us to just recognize there's so much bias in what we think is well and good. Um, and so if we try to step back and think about, we have four of us right now, and all four of us might have a different definition of what well means. So if we take out our assumptions and our subjective interpretations and we notice what is actually happening. I've heard it described sometimes as like if you're a robot and you just come and you just write down what you see, what people say, what would that look like? Um, so instead of saying the educator explained the activity well, I might instead write down the educator or leader broke an explanation into discrete steps and then modeled each step as a way for me to explain what I'm seeing happening. Instead of saying an educator did a good job of welcoming youth, I might say that they verbally greeted each youth by name as explanation about what is actually happening. We often talk about belonging because it is so critically important. Um, and I think it's really helpful just to understand that belonging is something that is very cultural and what it looks like and feels like and sounds like. And so a lot of times I heard one person that I really respect talk about how sometimes we see a young person who's passively in their seat, like we see acquiescence as a form of like belonging, that just because they're looking like they're going along with something, that they think that they're belonging. So, what does belonging actually look like? One definition that we sometimes use in youth development is that when youth self identify with a program, when they say, you've joined our club, or they might do something in which they're showing ownership of a club, that's a really good indicator that youth feel like they belong. Um, Other ways in which I like to also help people understand what is subjective or what is an interpretation is that sometimes we use these best practices that have lots of different components. So if I say the educator uses experiential learning techniques, that's something that we all want to do. But Michaela, what you might be doing in using an experiential learning technique might be a little different than what Liz, you're doing. And so what I like to do is as explicitly as possible, try to say, well, what is it that you're doing? I might say that when you gave an explanation, I noticed that you balanced the concrete with the abstract thinking, and that there was modeling beforehand so that a young person could see what happened. Or that when a young person was trying something out, that you're providing non-evaluative feedback, or that you're leading a reflection activity where youth have multiple reflection strategies. So these are different ways that I'm trying to be clear about what you're looking for. And as you can see, it's really helpful if I know what to look for going into something. I really appreciated Deborah's example about the dogs and how many owners picked up after their dogs. And she also might, for example, be wanting to talk a little bit about like what is the behavior that she noticed. So what those notes would look like are really drastically different. Um, So I have a clip that I'd love us to look at, and it's an outdoor school um, clip that shows an educator working with some young people, and it's from the Beatles program. Um, so what I'd like to do is watch the clip one time through, and just broadly, I'd like for us to look at what the educator is doing in terms of practices and what you see the young people doing. So let's look at that interaction between them, and let's take some notes on it. And then we'll talk about what notes we took. Um, I this clip was provided to me by the group at Outdoor School, and you'll see that there's lots of like edits. So we'll see an interaction, and then it's edited to the next interaction, and then it's edited to the next interaction. So it's really fast, and you're going to feel like I'm missing a lot, which is okay. It's a different experience to do an observation from an edited clip than it is when you actually go in and things are progressing at a different pace. And yet it's still really valuable. So we're going to watch from 1:45 to 4 minutes. So it'll be a couple minutes of watching. I'm going to go ahead and, yep, get ready to share that. Let's go ahead and begin.
Maybe, yeah, maybe it's like a dirty fungus. It's like an animal.
Whoa, it's an animal, huh? Why don't you guys describe it? Well, hey, Michael, come see this. Ryan, come see this.
It's an animal right there.
Yeah, I did that, and then.
Is it alive?
You guys want to describe what you notice about it?
An underbelly.
There's like cracks, like cracks, and then.
There's still dust under it.
Maybe the poison. There's still dust under it.
Maybe woodpeckers, because there's lots of little. There's lots of little like holes.
I see a lot of.
There's like it's like there's like soil in it.
Whoa, really?
As if it's deep.
That's really cool.
I wish I never ripped that. Now we know. Yeah, but see, it's grinding out the wood because see, they're so close. Oh, yeah, more termites. I think someone should rip away those. Probably.
This is really moist.
We'll take a peek. The woodpecker's probably like I have evidence of the tree, and then the tree fell over. Michael, and that's how there's cracks because it fell over.
I promise you'll be able to go back to the log more to explore. Right now, come over here. Talk to someone next to you about what you found, what was cool, what was interesting.
I found a seed.
I found like holes. Oh yeah, maybe like, and then we found like insects. Maybe they like made their way in, like they ate the wood. And then when I poked my finger into like the log, it was like soggy.
It's like it looked like a woodpecker. Yeah, because it was just like a line. Yeah, like holes. Because you know how usually they just go in one place and then we found that and they make like this big of a hole.
What evidence did you find of what might be making the log disappear?
The woodpeckers were pecking on the trees because there was like little holes inside the tree. And so there was also little cracks going along there. And so I'm guessing that it fell over because of the woodpeckers. And then termites got to it in the water.
Cool. So a couple things Michael did. He used the language of uncertainty. He said, maybe this happened, maybe this happened. He also started to talk about maybe what happened first. Maybe the woodpeckers came in first and then other stuff came along.
We found a snail in the log that might have been eating the tree and decomposing it.
People are saying this word decomposing. Anyone want to talk about what that is?
It's decomposing, maybe like it's rotting away.
Okay, it's rotting away, totally.
Okay, great. So I want to pause for a second, look at your notes, and notice where you have, oh, it's already 12:30. How did a half hour go by so fast? Okay, I'm gonna, rather than do a whole other round, take a look at your notes and notice where you have things like enthusiasm. If there is an interpretation of what youth might be feeling, What I would do if we had more time is I'd love to encourage us to look at this again and say, what is leading you to think that there is enthusiasm? And let's try to focus on, I like how Steve talked about kind of the initial observation and then the secondary level of observation. I like to encourage folks when they're first learning to do observations to write down direct quotes, write down what it is that you're hearing, because then later you can say, well, that's evidence of the educator checking for understanding. But if we're really talking about doing notes where you and I are seeing the same things, thinking about our notes as evidence means that we want to be able to not do interpretations of what might be happening or what we think were happening, but let's use evidence to write down direct quotes like, wow, my notes are really unclear, but she said, wow, really, when a young person had made a note, I heard her exclaim that. I heard her say, what I'm guessing you're fine, or what I'm noticing that is that Michael was using the language of uncertainty. So I tried to note the actual things that were happening so that we could go back then later and say, what's this evidence of? I'm sorry I did not manage the time as well as I thought we were going to do. What I had hoped we could do is do another round, and in that round, try to practice more on what it is that we're directly observing so that afterwards we can use that as evidence for what it is that we're looking for. Another great way to think about this is not just also noticing that the observations that are occurring that help me understand program quality, but what things can I count from this? What are the number of youth that ask questions? What are the number of times that the educator asked a certain question? So another way that we might want to consider how to conduct our observation are thinking about how can we use that observation to really collect numbers that help us understand what it is that we're observing. And that can be really fun. There's a whole strategy and evaluation that's called rapid inquiry cycles. But how could we look at something, look at it really quickly, see the number of times I asked an open-ended question, and then look at like, okay, the next time I get observed, let me try it again, but let's see if those numbers could change based on what it is that I'm observing and learning about myself and my own behavior. Thank you for spending a little bit of time talking about observations. I hope that this was something that was in some ways really helpful. And if you have more specific questions, you're welcome to reach out. Thanks, everybody.